What's up, everybody? This is one of the books that changed my life. It's called Fat of the Land. The Fat of the Land. It's by an Icelandic person. Icelandic man, to be more specific. And he wrote it about 100 years ago, approximately. And it's basically about how you can live indefinitely, eating just meat and fat and no plants. Talks a lot about Eskimos, Inuit, people from the north. Talks a lot about pemmican, pemmican, P-E-M-M-I-C-A-N. I won't explain too much what it is because that's what this book is for, but it's basically a mixture of meat and fat. It lasts for a long time and it's very healthy, versatile kind of food, good traveling food. And talks about a lot of stuff. Obviously, since it's got 250 pages. So I'm going to start reading it. There's some comments from a doctor. But before I even get to the real actual book, I'm just going to read these comments. Comment by one doctor, comment by another doctor, comment from the author, and maybe I will get to the... maybe not. I'll probably do that separately. Then I think there's an introduction. Yep, introductions. That will be separate. Okay. So, comment number 1 by Frederick J. Stare. Looks like Stare. Medical doctor, professor of nutrition and chairman, Department of Nutrition, Harvard School of Public Health, Boston. One day last January, the telephone rang. When I answered it, Paul White said, "Stephenson is in town. Could you arrange for someone to stop by his hotel room and draw a blood specimen? You know he has been eating largely meat for most of his life, and it would be interesting to know what his cholesterol and lipoproteins run. I've already asked his permission for a blood specimen, and he has no objection." Not only had he no objection, but he came over to our laboratory the next day to volunteer a second specimen so that we might have duplicate samples. And that was my introduction to Wilhelmur Stephenson. Since then, I have seen him and his charming wife, Evelyn, a number of times. Our correspondence has been frequent, and I am always amazed at his intellectual vigor and his breadth of knowledge. Purely by coincidence, the School of Public Health was holding a seminar on the afternoon Stephenson came over to volunteer a second blood specimen. 2 of its staff were reporting on some field observations of outbreaks of dysentery in the Arctic. Reports which, of course, we were delighted to invite Stephenson to hear. In the discussion that followed, his keen mind, sharp wit, and above all his anthropologic approach to the study of biologic problems were most evident. Those fortunate enough to have read the first edition of Not by Bread Alone was the first name of this book, basically, are aware of its contributions to nutrition. It emphasizes the great capacity of the human organism to adapt to wide changes in food intake and to maintain good health. Above all, it deals with the anthropologic approach to a biologic problem rather than with the epidemiological, clinical, or laboratory avenues of which we hear more these days. The anthropologic approach to nutrition studies helps confirm 2 points. 1, that good health is realizable by means of a variety of dietary patterns. 2, and this point is of particular significance for nutrition education, different peoples evolve their own evaluations or standards as to proper and improper dietary patterns. Stephenson spent many years living with the Eskimos in the days before the white man's habits had pervaded these people. He was not a trader, not a missionary, but an observer who took copious notes, most of which are in his priceless collection of Arctic lore in the Stephenson Collection at the Dartmouth College Library. The study of cultural factors in nutrition has emerged only recently as a distinct focus of research, marked by the formation of the Committee on Food Habits of the National Research Council in 1941. Wellen, that's a person's name, Wellen, writing in Nutrition Reviews a year ago, mentions that the concept of culture as developed in anthropology refers to those aspects of human existence transmitted through language and group life. In any given society, culture is the design for living developed by the group, a set of regulations governing the conduct of members. For the individual, culture acts as a screen of values and perceptions through which the person views food, his own body, and his health, and the world. End quote. Stephenson began his anthropological studies of the Eskimos a half-century ago, and thus was one of the first to use this discipline in human biology. It was his observation of the good health of the Eskimos, particularly their good teeth, that interested him in relation to their lean and fat diet of meat, and that led him in later years with his friend Anderson to carry out under scientific scrutiny their year-long meat diet described in this book. The dominant theme of Not by Bread Alone, whether one is reading about steaks, pemmican, K rations, or biltong is kind of like beef jerky from Africa. The dominant theme of Not by Bread Alone, whether one is reading about steaks, pemmican, K rations, or biltong, is the importance of meat, lean and fat, in the diet. While Stephenson's early interests result from his personal experiences in the Arctic, he has learned much from other travel, extensive reading, correspondence, and discussions. Stephenson has probably consumed more meat than any other person today. When I gave him dinner at the Harvard Club, Boston, it was roast beef with an extra serving of beef fat. At our home, it was steak with extra fat. Nothing else except martinis and cheese. Some of the fat is consumed first. This sounds a little like the DuPont Holiday Pennington diet one read so much about a few weeks ago. In fact, that diet was the Stephenson regimen dressed up with a little bedside manner, which is a half-hour morning walk and absolutely no alcohol. It is of interest to consider Stephenson's high intake of animal fat in connection with the current interest in atherosclerosis. Has it been good or bad for him? Would it be good or bad for you? Life expectancy at the time of Stephenson's birth was many years less than it is today. But he is 7 years past what it is today. But, and in my opinion an important but, Stephenson has never been obese. He has always been active physically, and he doesn't overeat. Should you start eating more meat, and particularly more animal fat? That depends on what you like to eat, how much you want to spend for food, and how carefully you watch your weight. Of course, if we all began eating more meat, there soon wouldn't be enough, particularly of the choice cuts. But the tenderizers do a good job of turning a chuck or top of the round into a first-class dish. I once asked Stephenson, if the Eskimos used any tenderizing procedure for their tougher cuts of meat, and he reminded me that the answer was in his Not by Bread Alone, even indexed under chewing. The answer is that they don't, but neither do they do much chewing. The uncivilized Eskimo, this is a quote, the uncivilized Eskimo has never had practice in herbivorous mastication, and his mother has never told him to chew for the good of his health. So he gives the piece a bite or two, rolls it around in his tongue once or twice, and swallows. But Stephenson is quite convinced that the tougher cuts of meat have the best flavor, and at home, Evelyn uses tenderizers generously. One of the most interesting developments of modern nutrition has been the emergence of a number of studies emphasizing the great ability of experimental animals, including man, to adapt to wide variations in diet. We all need protein, carbohydrate, fat, various vitamins and minerals, and water. The part about carbohydrate is not correct, but Hi, doggy. Beautiful. But where was I? Excuse me. We all need protein, fat, various vitamins and minerals, and water. But we can get these from a great variety of foods. And Stephenson tells in this book why he thinks we do not actually need any more carbohydrate than is contained in whole meat and whole milk. Even the amounts of these nutrients may be varied appreciably depending on the rest of the composition of the diet. It doesn't surprise me that Stephenson is in good health at 77, several years after his life expectancy. We have studied a number of vegetarians of comparable age and of equally good health. What is important is that our diets provide us with adequate amounts of the many amino acids, minerals, vitamins, and fatty acids we need, plus enough energy to balance our caloric needs, so that we keep our weight in the desirable range. It is also important that we enjoy what we eat. I hope this new edition of Not by Bread Alone, under its presently controversial new name, The Fat of the Land, will be as entertaining to you as it has been to me. July 1956. So that's the end of that comment. And then comment by Paul Dudley White, medical doctor. It is a pleasure to write a comment for this new edition of Wilhelmir Stephenson's book, originally titled Not by Bread Alone. In view of his interest in a high-fat diet, he has asked me to summarize briefly my own experiences and thoughts on the subject of life and heart disease, with particular reference to the causes of high blood pressure and of coronary atherosclerosis, which is the basis, when of high degree, for the clinical condition of angina pectoris and coronary thrombosis. For a good many years, we doctors have talked about these things, but only relatively recently have we done much more. Even now we are barely scratching the surface. There appear to be two sets of causative factors which may or may not be of equal importance. These are the basic or fundamental factors which concern the host, and which one can do little about, and the environmental factors which can be altered, and the control of which may in some way neutralize or even supersede the harmful effects of the basic factors, thus combating an attitude of hopeless fatalism. Prominent among possible basic factors are race, in parentheses, a doubtful factor per se, heredity, which appears to have a potent influence no matter what the race, age, which is an insuperable factor as far as chronology is concerned, but which may prove to be amenable at least to some degree as far as physiological age is concerned, and sex, which is heavily weighted against the male in youth and middle age. Among the possible environmental factors are stress and strain, which have as yet been inadequately studied, exercise, which has been hopefully looked to by some of us as of some use in prophylaxis, but the value of which is as yet unproved, toxic agents, in particular tobacco and alcohol, which are of doubtful importance, and diet, which now holds the limelight. Most workers in the field regard overweight from overeating as a harmful factor, though not the chief cause behind hypertension. And a diet overrich in total fat calories, such as the typical American diet, in which 40 to 50% of the calories are in fat, as a potent factor in the overwhelming epidemic of coronary heart disease, which has descended upon us in the present generation as a pernicious blight. On the other hand, there is a handful of observers, like Wilhelmir Stephenson, who have other ideas, in fact, almost the opposite, namely that a diet very rich in fat, up to 80% of the total calories, with the rest of the calories in protein, is best for the health. This raises the question, is it possible that the extremes of fat intake, very high, 80%, or low, 30%, for example, are safer than intermediate mixtures of fairly high fat, 40 to 50%? Dr. Stephenson presents his side of the case in a new chapter in this book. More controlled scientific data are needed by all concerned, especially by the high-fat proponents. In any case, to paraphrase the title of the book, we may say that coronary heart disease is caused not by fat alone, despite the probable major importance of excessive fat in the diet. this guy hasn't made the connection between vegetable oils and polyunsaturated fats, and the difference between them and saturated animal fats. That's the answer. Some fats are good, some fats are bad. I quite agree with Stephenson that a study should be made of high-fat eaters, 80% and over, in contrast to intermediate and low-fat eaters who otherwise live the same way. If, however, the diet eventually proves to be an important key to our current problems in counteracting the effect of heredity, we may rest content. July 1956. So I'm going to stop there for this video. Those are the comments by other people, and then there's a comment by the author next. And yeah, I'm doing this. I want to do this because there's one audiobook on YouTube that really sucks. It's a collection of people who don't know how to read with a lot of distracting sounds. I don't know, there might be some distracting sounds around me, but I at least know how to read. And I have a good voice for it. And this is important information. So that's that's part one. Hope you enjoyed it, and we've got a lot of ground to cover. Buckle up. Oh, let me just say, like, why this book changed my life. I was a vegan at one point. Very stupid thing to do, turns out. But I was under the impression that humans are not designed to eat meat. I was under the impression, thanks to the propaganda and lies of the American Heart Association and American Dietetic Association, that a vegan diet is completely adequate, provides everything you need, and not only that, but conversely, that meat causes heart disease, causes cancer, other things. So I basically thought meat was poison. And then I read this book about people who eat nothing but meat their entire lives, and they live long and healthy, very long and very healthy lives, and they have perfect teeth, also. So that helped me to realize that someone was lying to me. Either this book was lying, or the people who had told me that meat was poisonous they were lying. Turns out it's the people who think meat is poison. They're lying, definitely. So I don't like lies. I don't like when my brothers and sisters, my human family are lied to. This is a big lie. It's very important that we address it and squash it and mutilate it and destroy it and all that. So I'm going to read this whole book eventually. And if you listen to all of it, you will learn a lot, and maybe you'll change your diet. The food pyramid, or now I guess it's a plate, but it used to be the pyramid with all the grains on the bottom. That is not a food pyramid, it's a genocide pyramid. It's a sickness and illness, slow kill, pharmaceutical industry pyramid. All right, I guess that's about it for now. Look out for the next video, or enjoy the next video. I'm really bad at ending videos. I can't just click the stop button. All right, ready? Stop.